Hey guys, Crypto Sunday and another red week, unsurprisingly. If you'd sort of seen some of the news during the week, we sort of had a bit of a flash crash from some news which I'll get to, but yeah, about 20,000 down, kind of expected. You can see some of the weeklies here, but let's have a look at some news. So we got a fairly negative coin shares report as expected, almost exactly the same as previous week. 1.7 billion in outflows. I think we're going to get another one, not quite so negative tomorrow, but we'll see. Bitcoin 1.3 billion out, Ethereum 300 million out, and sort of smattering of smaller numbers. Multi-asset still outflow out of XRP and Solana. We haven't seen that for a little while. Litecoin, a little amount out. 14 million into shorting Bitcoin. That's quite an amount. 10% of assets under management. So people getting very excited about shorting. 8.6 million into other ETFs, which is interesting considering everything else. And looking at the by country, nothing too much to see there. 37 million out of Canada, which is reasonably big number. 11 into Switzerland and 19 out of Sweden, but nothing sort of huge there. And US being the big number, of course. And looking at the recent week, we had inflow days on Monday and Friday, although Friday we don't actually have a couple. Vanek looks like haven't got their number yet, and Fidelity potentially sort of bumping up Friday's number a reasonable amount. All the others are positive. Monday was positive across the board pretty much, quite evenly spread. Fidelity actually with the biggest. And then, yeah, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday were all net outflow days. So depends on what Fidelity's number is, but it looks like we're probably going to get a negative amount for the week, but not too much. Sort of 500 and 330 offset by these losses. Probably a few 100 million loss compared to 1.7 billion the last sort of 2 weeks. So. Yeah, not horrendous. Ethereum, it looks like, was slightly worse. Friday, they didn't get an inflow. There was quite an outflow from BlackRock. And yeah, only Tuesday they got a small inflow into BlackRock, actually. And yeah, Grayscale, both the old and new one, a little bit all over the place. Monday was a very slow day on a net basis. And Wednesday and Thursday, both 80 million out. So yeah, not the best week for Ethereum. Kind of hope this isn't Solana sort of petering out. It sort of turned into similar to the others, couple of or three inflow days, but two outflow days, dwarfing those inflows. So it's a net outflow for the week again. Previous week was, it looks like, only slightly, but yeah, two net outflow weeks in a row for a fairly new set of ETFs, albeit we don't have BlackRock or or some of the other big players. We do have Fidelity, but Fidelity actually the small player here. They've not been able to, well, either not sold their clients on Solana just yet, or yeah, some other reason. But Bitwise are the big player here, 670 million. You would think if Solana starts to become big, then Fidelity would gain, and you would get a BlackRock one, and those two would become the dominant players. But yeah, we'll have to see. So there's lots of reasons for the drop midweek, I think. Sort of macro forces, stocks not doing particularly well, all sorts really. A lot of people are trying to put it down to one thing. I don't think that is really the case. I don't think there's any one thing that would solely put it down. But things like this don't exactly help. South Korean exchange Bithum, or Bithum potentially. Yeah, they did a sort of rewards little. It was actually a fairly little rewards program. They were distributing about $1.40, 2,000 Korean won to not even 1,000 participants, it looks like. So a very, very small little promotional event. But instead of sending 2,000 Korean won, they sent 2,000 Bitcoin to an awful lot of people. Now, this wasn't real Bitcoin. It was sort of a line on the people's ledger to say that they have 2,000 Bitcoin, but they were still trying to sell it on the exchange, and it drove the price on BitHum down to $55,000, which is actually not that much lower than it went. I'm not sure. I haven't sort of got where the time was on this. They said on Saturday that it had accidentally given away more than 40 billion worth of Bitcoin. The mistake took place on Friday. So yeah, Thursday I think was the huge drop down, but who knows? Maybe it was sort of coinciding with the exact drop to 60,000. Sort of, you get arbitrage people try and buy it on one exchange, sell it on the other, and they're saying that this was dealt with within sort of an hour, but it didn't stop. Thousands, a thousand people sort of saying that they'd got 2,000 Bitcoin and immediately going to dump the whole lot because they weren't looking to do that. They were just claiming their $1.40 in cash rewards. So yeah, that sort of thing doesn't help. We call that a fat finger mistake. You also have things like this, even caught the eye of the big short Michael Burry. Things like Hyperliquid now are trading sort of real world assets. People are betting on the silver price on Hyperliquid, a generally crypto exchange, and obviously using the same intense leverage that crypto people like to. And yeah, when silver dropped, sort of, I don't think it's been emphasized quite enough that Bitcoin's fallen about 50%, or sort of a couple of weeks ago it had fallen 40% in about three months. Silver fell about 40% in a few days. So if we're talking about volatility, I know Scott Melker has sort of mentioned this a couple of times. Seems to sort of fall on deaf ears, especially when things are down. But yeah, certainly true. So yeah, when you get liquidations like this, you can end up with a collateral sort of death spiral where you're forced to potentially sell your Bitcoin because you've bet on the price of silver going up, and they take all of your collateral basically. So it's just forced selling everything you have. And he's noted, this one crypto market, ironically called Hyperliquid. There wasn't enough liquidity to fund your shorts, and you get liquidated. So yeah, nice that this is even catching the eyes of sort of, I would say, TradFi. So following this drop, we have had a bit of dip buying from people. We sort of mentioned last week that there was some large holders sort of on a net basis buying again, where they had been selling out quite a large amount of their holdings, and getting wallets holding 10 to 100 Bitcoin have actually been the most aggressive dip buyers. So 10 to 100 is a reasonable amount of Bitcoin, reasonable amount of money, and yeah, they note they sort of put this 0 to 1 trend score, accumulation trend score, so it's a bit like the PMI numbers. I believe above 0.5 is sort of net accumulation, and it got to 0.68, so pretty good. People buying the dip. Potentially that sort of flash crash to I think it got to like 59,950 on some exchanges. Could have potentially been the bottom. We don't know. So now down sort of over 50%, or was at that point down over 50% from its all-time high. It's since recovered, and I believe we're starting with a 7 now. So, yeah. Yeah, another thing you potentially had this week was the downside of options. As I say, there was a hell of a lot of things sort of all coinciding at once this week. Sort of liquidations on traditional exchanges, and collateral from things like silver, and then options as well. Hedge funds potentially investing in ETF options on Bitcoin's BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF, IBIT, volume surged to 2.33 million contracts on Thursday. They had, I believe, just raised the options limit. So, yeah, maybe that wasn't the best thing quite so soon. They said they were making special, special exception to do that immediately. So you could almost get a conspiracy theory out of that if you really wanted to, but I can't imagine there's all that much in it. But yeah, you had potentially a hedge fund, sort of, maybe not the whole hedge fund blowing up as they're suggesting here, but sort of one or two of their people, or one or two of their trades potentially getting liquidated and having to sell an awful lot of options. So yeah, or hedge a load of options. So that can cause spikes in the price, and yeah, we know people love options. One day, 0 day to expiry options now and things, and we're going to start getting that in the Bitcoin market, even in the ETF market, which you would think is your sort of buy and hold. People are calling them boomer stuff. No, not once you start getting options on it. So we started getting the Q4 Masari reports. Not got sort of any for my tokens yet, but I do focus on some of the others just to get a feel of the market. Always like looking at XRP being sort of one of the biggest coins, and yeah, it doesn't look pretty at all. I don't really keep too informed on the tech side of things for XRP, but whether there's a sort of reason for some of these mass drop-offs, like transaction fees. It's sort of been 1.1 million Q1 2025, and sort of dropped to 680,000, 513,000, and now dropped to 133,000. So a 74% drop on last quarter. That's quite a drop. Daily active addresses hasn't actually come down that much, down 8%. Is sort of significantly down from, again, Q1, the sort of peak of Trump mania and all sorts. Daily transactions actually the same, actually up from Q2 2025, same as a year ago. And yeah, total new addresses looking all right. It was just transaction fees, really, 74% down. I couldn't quite understand what was going on there. Daily NFT transactions as well absolutely fell off a cliff. It was 15k in the big Trump quarter actually, but yeah, 10k down from 76, 50 in Q2. So basically, XRP numbers looking pretty awful or roughly the same, which not exactly great for a $111 billion market cap coin. You'd want to see something really. And we have Tron, which is basically a sort of look into the stablecoin world. Don't think they do all that much else at the moment, apart from sort of some Asian gambling and things, from what I've heard. Still not quite as bad as XRP, but not looking great. Total revenue down 38%, 655 million for the quarter. Average transaction fee down to 70 cents, which is quite low compared to the previous year. It's sort of been relatively steady, over $1. Daily active addresses is up 12%, which is good. 27% year over year. So yeah, maybe they've just, I don't know whether they've decided to drop the fee on purpose. Didn't really sort of look into it too much. I'm just curious about the numbers really. Ecosystem TVL down a little bit, but that's in dollar terms, so That's probably just part of the market crash, really. And stablecoin market up 7%, up 39% year on year. So yeah, stablecoin still doing pretty well. DEX volume down 31%. Not a huge surprise. What is a fairly nice surprise, though, is Helium Mobile, despite the sort of crash in all tokens, and Helium hasn't sort of gotten away from that. It is quite a lot down, but users at an all-time high, nearly 3 million users per day. This is sort of a spike up over the last few days. I've not seen any sort of promotional event or anything that they're doing. It's also backed up by their carrier offload, sort of taking data from other carriers at 117 terabytes. So that was sort of in the 70s and 80s, just a couple of weeks ago. Whether this is a short-term spike, maybe I'll come back to it in the next couple of weeks and sort of see where it's got. But yeah, it was sort of fairly, steady up and down, whether this is sort of weekend usage and midweek usage. But yeah, to suddenly have quite the spike up, they haven't installed sort of a load more hotspots or anything, and Helium Mobile sign-ups are just a continuous line upwards because they have their free tier, which you sort of get a very, very small amount, but you can basically have a free SIM card. So yeah, looking pretty good. It's just the token, isn't looking particularly positive from it. I think there'll be a Masari report for Helium a little bit later, but there is this one from Blockworks, which has come out a little bit early, and yeah, things are looking very strongly up. These are obviously not including that big spike to all-time high user numbers, but you got revenue $5.2 million, up from 2.8 in Q3 and under $1 million sort of earlier this year. So very, very strong. The Internet of Things network is sort of barely moving, basically. And total expenses in the form of sort of token emissions, they've cut that quite drastically. $28 million in this quarter last year, down to 18, 16, 8 million, and then 4.2 million. So it has put them to a net profit of $1 million for the quarter. Not exactly a massive profit, but it's not a massive token, not a massive team. So yeah, I thought that was very, very positive looking. Could indicate the start of something, bit of a bump potentially for the whole market. Well, the whole deep in market, as they call it on Solana. And looking at the Bitcoin hash rate, so we did get the sort of highly anticipated drop in difficulty. We have sort of since had, this was yesterday, we have since had quite a spike up in hash rate, sort of maybe people holding off until the difficulty dropped, and in anticipation they have added a huge amount of hash rate, and we're suddenly back to 1.2 zeta hash sort of late last night. This has sort of since dropped down back below 1 zeta hash. So yeah, hopefully this doesn't sort of hold and we get an enormous spike up in 2 weeks. This has sort of brought us to So you see, this has brought us down from 141.6 to 125.86, which is quite the drop. This had sort of been, projected in the sort of 120 area, even a little bit below 120, sort of earlier last week, or earlier this week rather. But yeah, that sort of rise in hash rate over the last day or so has brought this number up, but 125 is pretty solid. If you look at sort of the last 6 months or so, we did have a little bit of a spike down in July, but even going back to sort of April, May time, we were at 123, sort of 126 in June. So yeah, we're basically back sort of 9 months level of difficulty. So that's pretty good. Helps the miners no end, especially with these low Bitcoin prices. If we can, I don't know, maybe it's wishful thinking to sort of get this stay relatively durable. Lower difficulty and potentially rising Bitcoin price as people, the public miners, sort of switch to AI, would be very, very nice. So just looking at the global liquidity compared to Bitcoin, a lot of people are sort of, very unhappy with this, saying it's dead and the correlation has gone. I think that is largely because of, this was being popularized over the last year or so, and people were looking at this 12-week delayed correlation since 2024, since the ETFs come out. I certainly was, and thought it would potentially follow now that it had sort of come even more into TradFi with the ETFs. But if you zoom out on the long term, to say that this has completely broken down, it's failed, it was never a thing before, I think is a little bit nonsense, to be honest. It on a sort of a longer time frame, it can diverge from global liquidity a fair amount, but it does seem to sort of come back in relatively short order. It sort of spends a little bit of time below sometimes. This is, like that period here in 2015, it was below there for sort of 8 or 9 months, which is about how long we've been below it currently. So yeah, it is quite a stark difference. Probably the biggest difference. Well, I mean, you can move this chart around ever so slightly, and things will change. But yeah, on a sort of broad scale, this is one of the largest divergences we've had to the downside. We've had some big divergences to the upside. Sort of, I kind of count this as sort of more the early days of crypto. It was, up and down all over the place. It's sort of, it's got a little bit less volatile and a little bit tighter correlated, sort of since 2020, really. We maybe shouldn't look at just 2024 onwards, but I would say this is still holding up very, very well, and potentially these crocodile jaws closing. I have been sort of adding more and more indicators sort of to this chart, not indicators in the sort of traditional sense, but other things that it could potentially correlate with. And the chart is sort of getting a little bit complicated now. You've got lots and lots of scales here. So you sort of see down here is gold, which I don't sort of have flicked on. Basically, whichever one you flick on, it sort of highlights the the price of, or the level of whatever you're looking at on that scale. So gold is 4,967. If you turn gold off, then yeah, that scale is just ignored. This scale obviously being the Bitcoin price, and this one over here being the orange global liquidity indicator. But something else I sort of had been noticing, and a lot of people have been talking about, is the ISM PMIs, which I mentioned yesterday in the stock side, have sort of picked up quite dramatically. And if you look at the ISM manufacturing PMI, this is sort of a little bit different in that it's a diffusion index, as we call it. So if it's above 50, it's sort of in expansion territory, the manufacturing side in the US, and sort of them dealing with the world is in expansion, and below 50 is in contraction. So it's not going to follow obviously one-to-one with the Bitcoin chart, because its mean is 50. It should always be somewhat around 50, about up or below 50. You can get the Bitcoin chart closer to this if you do it on a year-on-year percentage change basis, because that would sort of mean revert, and it would be sort of down year-on-year, up year-on-year, and sort of the mean being zero. But I've just sort of done it against the Bitcoin price, the raw sort of Bitcoin price here, and you can sort of see Bitcoin has never really topped without the manufacturing index sort of being at a high. So that would sort of be the the real economy, or not the services economy, I suppose, but the real manufacturing economy booming. Bitcoin seems to do well, and you've got this massive drop here in COVID times, and then we had these sort of revenge spending, everything opening up and people going mad. Did sort of correlate. Actually, the big spike correlated with the sort of March-April top, and then we sort of got a lower high in the December, actually slightly higher all-time high, but you can see it was a sort of weak all-time high even in the manufacturing index. And they have put they hadn't put this on before actually, but the latest, so it's been low for 2 or 3 years really, since sort of December or since early 2023. This has been basically below 50 with a couple of very brief spikes above, and it has now shot up to 52.55. So again, whether this is a sort of one-time high spike up, we won't know until next month, but I would predict this is partly due to the $600 billion of capex that the Mag 7 have announced. So potentially getting a building boom, and yeah, if we get the this is only a once a month indicator, so it's not something you can track all that often, but if we start to get a push up into the sort of 50s, high 50s, towards the middle of this year, later this year, then we could see a potential increase in the Bitcoin price. This is sort of one, as I say, one indicator of why we haven't had a monster inflow. It's sort of been, Bitcoin's been going up despite the manufacturing index being low. You could say in part due to the ETFs and in part due to the DAT treasury companies sort of just, I guess, forcing it up towards this price. Obviously, MicroStrategy and people buying an enormous amount of crypto. So yeah, just another indicator that I thought was interesting to keep an eye on. So portfolio-wise, obviously everything's down, quite a lot of them in double figures. Bitcoin down 10.2%, Ethereum and Solana both sort of in the 12%, and then a lot of the others in the teens. Solana, Helium, all the sort of ecosystem coins. Radium 17%, Gito 17%. A couple, Metaplex and Honey, just in the low single digits, admittedly, although they are tiny, tiny positions now because they are tiny coins. Chainlink only 8.5% as well. And yeah, you notice some of my older coins that I don't hold anymore, but I do still keep them here just to keep an eye on. VeChain actually in the green for the week, but yeah, I don't. Shouldn't be too unhappy to have sold that off. My average cost was, you can see, over double the current price. So yeah, it's obviously way down from where I sold. Basic attention token actually isn't that much lower than where I sold, but it never really went on a huge bull run. So there you go. But yeah, overall a fair knock for the week, but hopefully we can come back from this, and Bitcoin with a 7 suddenly doesn't look all that bad compared to the last week. So leave your thoughts in the comments below, and like and subscribe. See you soon.